As a sustainability office at the University of Winnipeg, we're very interested in engaging as many people as possible in the conversation of how we can make the campus more sustainable. But that's not just about the recycling on campus and the composting or about our greenhouse gas emissions. It's a lot about where we fit within the larger society.
So I have this really romantic idea that universities are places where we're actually supposed to talk about what it means to be alive and how we should be good people and what kind of communities we want to live in and kind of what kind of world we want to create and co-create. That can happen in any discipline, right? Like philosophers do it, people in English do it, people in science do it. But to me, it's all about what do we want to do here?
I think definitely asking the question in the first place is important, and I don't think people are challenged enough. The idea of what kind of life that is isn't really a question that people think about a lot of the time.
The phrase goes back to Aristotle. That's who really is the first person to theorize the good life and what it means. And that had to do with understanding what human beings are, what is unique to them, what is essential about them, and satisfying those needs. In his case, it was about contemplation and being philosophical.
If we were engaged in the contemplative life in the manner that Aristotle recommends it, we wouldn't be focused on exploiting the planet. We wouldn't have arrived at our environmental crisis.
In the 20th century, actually, the term the good life has been kind of systematically removed from sociology, because the idea is that scientists themselves can't figure out what a good life is.
What's useful about Aristotle and the good life, like there's lots to be critical about it, but I think what's useful about it is precisely this notion of, and what I think is relevant today, is that sense that it's trying to get us to think much bigger questions than physical pleasure and the sort of wealth and the amassing of wealth and those things.
There's a lot going on at the university that is conducive to redefining the good life. There are a lot of student interest groups directed both towards personal hobbies and interests, but also a lot of social causes, and they're often very dedicated to raising awareness and such, and I think that's important. And also action, which is at least as important, if not more important, because there can be a lot of talk, but you need action. I think that promotes the good life.
I could say that at this point I'm teaching Gertrude Stein. I love teaching Gertrude Stein because she challenges me about issues of accessibility and readability. She gives me forms that are not easy for me to understand, and she asks me to be aware of how I behave in situations that are not easy for me to understand. And I think that that's a great teaching.
I think the Bike Lab is a great influence. I guess its main purpose is to sort of foster and allow the environment for a better cycling community on campus. So really focus on sort of providing people with a space and knowledge so that they're comfortable cycling downtown, comfortable repairing their own bike, comfortable cycling in the winter.
Sort of a paradox that's at the center of the idea of global citizen, the idea of what it means to live well in an increasingly globalized community. And the paradox is this: it's being able to judge the good and the bad, being in a position to say this is wrong or this is right, to have a sense of universal justice. But at the same time, and here's the paradox, being exceedingly open to difference, being able to imagine the world, how it looks from people that are very different from us, with whom we might disagree, and therein lies the conundrum, the paradox, to judge, yes, but also to be exceedingly curious.
A lot of economists would say that people define for themselves what they think of as a good life, and one of the rules of the economy should be to give people the opportunities, right, to pursue that kind of objective. Most economists would be sort of leery to say that people should live in a certain way. I think they overall believe that we should try to minimize things like inefficiency. Right? By that I mean economists are very sort of concerned with things like externalities, right? An externality meaning where different people impose a cost on some other part of the society. So virtually every economist I could think of would say that these are bad things, right? We should try to make people pay the real price of their activities and the choices they make. But if they do, they should be able to make all kinds of different choices.
In the post-war period in particular is heavily associated with a particular set of commodities, particular kind of house, particular kind of car, particular number of children, and the lifestyle and education of those children. So yeah, and that comes, I mean, advertising plays a big role, but also the state in associating the notion of citizenship increasingly with a certain standard of living rather than participation.
I think the good life in our privileged society of upper middle class Canada is the accumulation of stuff, or the accumulation of more privilege and more power, and always at the expense of someone else. I think we talk ourselves into believing that we're not privileged and we need more and more things. We need the best, the latest iPod. We need the latest iPhone. We all need a summer vacation. And we definitely do need a winter vacation when the temperature's minus 30. And if I don't get that, then I'm somehow underprivileged, or I'm somehow marginalized, or I'm somehow not having a good life.
I mean, there's lots of evidence to suggest colonialism, imperialism, that our standard of living is premised on the underdevelopment of other parts of the world. That is to say, the extraction of their raw materials and their cheap labor at the expense of the development of what we would regard as healthy domestic educational health institutions. So in that sense, it's all relational.
If you look across countries, clearly at the very bottom end, very impoverished sorts of areas, happiness, subjective well-being increases as wealth goes up at the lower end, but eventually it levels off.
The concept and the idea, and sometimes the actual direct translation from a lot of Indigenous languages, is something like the good life, or walking in beauty. What higher calling could a person have than walking in beauty? So you come back to balance as well, and remaining aware of relationality. So that's another primary aspect of good life in Indigenous terms. You don't overuse resources, but you also don't ignore resources.
But a lot of people in our community don't really have an understanding that you know, somebody may not have the same access to life-sustaining resources if they can't drive, if they're stuck in a poor part of town, if they're not mobile, if they can't get out of their apartment or get out of their house. So for me, sustainability means that we as a community are ensuring that all our members are accessing everything that they need.
That we can't disembed ourselves from the community, right? I think is incredibly important to political philosophy. You know, throughout the ages, that's been one of the major themes. And it is connected to the notion of the good life. I can't live a good life solely on my own. So, and there's a tension within Aristotle in terms of, it seems to be contemplative and it seems to be the individual philosopher, but I think if you read Aristotle more clearly, you have to live in a community that is striving towards the good life.
Universities are appropriately concerned about social justice, and there are many opportunities at this university to hear people address these important questions. But the question of the good life, which has implications for all of the other questions that we're trying to answer, is really not taken in and of itself. And what I like about the question is that every discipline, I think, can contribute to the answer. Because every discipline, from the point of view of those that are practitioners are of the discipline, I think aim to contribute to an understanding of something that is relevant to human beings living a good life.